there's something innate about most people, not all, that they feel like they have to give back. So the more you get, the more you have to give because we want to right the balance of that scale.
Yeah. Thanks for breaking that down. I think I mean, the goal here with the show and all of content that I'm putting out is really to, one, hopefully inspire some people as they see other people in action making an impact in the world, but also to equip them. So there's, I guess, that educational element. And I really appreciate when founders of companies or people come in and they can speak frankly about the mechanisms behind it and where the money comes from. So I think, you and I probably of a similar age bracket. I think you might be a fraction older than me. I'm 41.
I'm a little bit older, yep.
But, I was still, I guess I'm old enough that I was around in an era and even had employers who were very guarded about any intellectual property. There was a period of time where nobody wanted to tell anybody anything. And what I've just loved, and you guys are a classic example, is that it seems that the companies who are more willing to give away their intellectual property and to offer value for free to people are the ones who are winning in today's economy. Which, I think it's a fascinating dichotomy. Do you think that we've changed as people, or do you think that potentially this goodwill and the Seth Godin kind of concept there, where if you give, somebody's more likely to reciprocate in return? Do you think that's always been there, but people have simply just had the wrong impression and were going about business, I guess, potentially the way that they'd always done it, which was in that kind of more guarded, more self-focused way?
Mm-hmm. There's a couple of things you brought up right away, so I want to attack, right? So Robert Cialdini wrote this book. I think it's called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. He talks about 6 triggers in modern society and society in general that people exploit for sometimes not the best purposes. And he talks about it in that the way that our societies and people, strangers, are able to come together and form communities is because of this social contracts that we've developed, these unspoken things. Reciprocity is one of those core concepts. And reciprocity is a very basic idea. If you do something for somebody and they feel like you did something for them, there's something innate about most people, not all, that they feel like they have to give back. So the more you get, the more you have to give because we want to right the balance of that scale. If you want to attack somebody's character, you say you're a user, you just take, you're selfish, you're self-centered, and then we feel really bad and we're like, well, we don't want to be like that. We want to right that scale. So marketers and companies also exploit this nature of human beings and that they give you something of low value to them, but there's some perceived value, and then you feel compelled to give back. And I'll tell you exactly what I'm talking about. If you ever visit like a high traffic area that there's lots of tourists, you'll notice there's some people they'll offer you a free book or a flower, and as soon as you get that, they'll say, would you like to make a donation to this foundation? And you feel so compelled, like you don't even want this book, you'll never read it, but they're triggering reciprocity. Now, the problem is after we are kind of wise to what's happening, we first of all don't accept the book because we know as soon as we accept something, we feel compelled to write the scale once again, or we accept it and say, nope, I'm not going to give you anything. You'll notice this also in restaurants. Right before you get the check, they're going to give you a surprise just for you, kind of like a little amuse-bouche, like a little desserty kind of thing. One bite, you eat it, and then they notice that there's a significant increase in tips. This is also true like when they give you free samples at a cookie shop or a chocolate shop. They're like, free sample, and it costs them very little to give you that sample, but they see a significant spike in sales. Like I think it's 40%. Seas Candies, you walk in there and they give you a sample that you're more likely to buy. So this is just something that's happened since the beginning of we moved away from being nomadic hunter-gatherers. Like we had to form societies and we had to kind of have agreement. And if you even look at those basic structures, if I'm the hunter, I'm strong. I'm going to go and kill something to bring back to feed the village. In the meanwhile, somebody will tend the farm and look after the kids and make sure what's there is still going to be there when we get back. See, so it works like that because we're cooperative and social by nature. So we give, and in a modern context, we think that when we give, we lose something. If I give you some piece of information or knowledge, I'm going to be less, as if there's 100% of me, and every piece I give starts to chip away at that and it starts to erode who I am. But what we don't understand is this: it doesn't cost you anything to give, and it literally doesn't take anything from you. But when you give, you're actually building something new. You're building a bridge, you're building a house, a structure, something in which you can then use and trade for something else. And that's what it really means to build an audience, a community, because the community shows up for you because you show up for them. So when you say, I have a book or I have a concert or I'm going to be speaking at an event or I'm going to sell tickets to a workshop, people show up because you've already given. You've paid them in advance and they will return that to you.
Yeah, fascinating. And listening to you talk about the analogy of the hunter and the village and those sorts of things, it sparks one of the questions that I wanted to put to you. So before I ask the question, I want to make a statement, and this is not a statement that's deliberately to try and, I don't know how people say it in America, but we sometimes use a term, blow smoke up your ass down here.
Same term.
Yeah.
Same term.
Yeah. Something that I've noticed, I believe you maybe have even spoken about, and I don't think that you were gloating or doing an egotistical manner or anything along those lines, just more probably a fact that you were stating, is you have a tremendous capacity to do three things at once that I think most people can't do, or a lot of people can't do. And that being that you can work really hard for long periods of time, still maintaining a high attention to detail and focus and thinking, I guess, at a high level, when you're communicating with people. I think I think it'd be fair to say most people can't do all three of those things. Maybe a lot of people can do two, and they're probably considered, pretty efficient and effective workers. So my question is, have you always had that capacity, or is that something that's come after just having so many years, I guess, in your craft?
I think the answer is no. I've not always had that capacity because first comes some level of maturity and self-awareness and clarity of goals and purpose. And you're not born with that because up until about 0 to 18 years old, I was like everybody else. I did the minimum to get by. I like to find distractions instead of doing the hard work. I never enrolled in any team sports or took piano or music lessons or anything like that. Anything that required putting in serious time just didn't fit. Like I skateboarded, but it wasn't like I did drills and I wasn't trying to join a team. I didn't have that desire. But something happened to me, like when I was around 18 years old. I was going to community college and it felt like I got to get my life together. And I think for some people, it happens when you're 14. Some people have 18 and 28 and 38 or 48 or never. And each person is running on a different timeline. I just happened to be lucky that I realized that when I did, that nothing was going to be given to me, that things weren't going to materialize by themselves. And once I became really, really focused on wanting to get into design school so I can start my career in life, because I desire to be in control of my own life, have that level of autonomy, financial freedom, and independence from my parents at least, I had to get a skill. Because I also worked a bunch of odd and end jobs making minimum wage, and I knew that was going to rot my brain and it was going to be a waste of my personal potential. And I think many people's potential, like to do unskilled labor, robots can do that. And I don't want to do the work that a robot can do. Once I found that focus, that clarity and that purpose and the drive, things started to click in. And I'll tell you this, it's like whenever you get good at something, it's its own reward and its own motivation, and a habit starts to form. So if you exercise for a period of time, but you don't see any gains and you don't see anything, it can become very discouraging. But if you put in the work, you start dieting and you start eating clean and working out on a consistent basis and consuming enough protein, all of a sudden you're like, I never knew I had a little muscle there. And then it makes you want to do that more. And it's true about almost everything in your life. So this really boring, repetitive work, this monotonous labor that you have to put in to get good at something, it helps to separate the wannabes from the ones that are going to be great. Right? Because the ones who pretend, who show up and dabble in something, they never put in enough work to get great. But we hear, like, I'm a fan of mixed martial arts. Some of these world champion, pound for pound best, they were almost bred from the very beginning to do a martial art, and they were so focused and they were grinding away at this when most of us were just sitting there thinking, what am I going to eat? Like, where am I going to go and what video game am I going to play? They're thinking about those kinds of things. So that kind of focus is actually its own form of momentum. So once you find that, you don't want to let that go. And luckily, I'm 48 now. I found something that I think will take me to the end of my days here on Earth, because I know I will expire, that I can focus on this thing and get really great fulfillment, that the pathway to learning and growth are tremendous. The upside potential is tremendous. So I'm in all the way 100% now.